Welcome to Core Concept HQ, where big ideas are simplified.
Today, we are diving deep into a book that, well, it really changed the game for millions. Eckhart Tolle's The Power of Now.
It's a huge one. And it became this phenomenon because it promises something so incredibly direct. Not years of therapy, not some complex philosophy, but a way out of mental suffering that's available, well, right now.
Exactly. And that's our mission for this deep dive,
Yeah.
to get practical. This isn't a spiritual lecture.
No, not at all. Think of this as an extraction. We're going to pull apart the core mechanics of Tolle's ideas, mainly the ego and presence, and give you a kind of high-value shortcut.
A toolkit.
A toolkit, yeah,
Yeah.
for dealing with the everyday stuff. Stress, overthinking, that little voice in your head that's always criticizing. We're really focusing on the application.
Because that core message that freedom is available now, it can get lost. People hear it and their minds just, resist. But the whole framework really comes from this one incredibly intense personal moment in Tolle's own life.
And starting there is so important because it grounds everything. This isn't some abstract theory he came up with. This came from the edge.
It did. He talks about being in his late 20s, just consumed by depression. He wakes up one night with this feeling of absolute dread, just this crushing weight.
And the voice in his head is just repeating how miserable his life is.
Over and over. And then out of nowhere, this one really peculiar thought pops into his head.
I cannot live with myself any longer.
Right. Which sounds like a pretty standard thought for someone in that state. But for him, it triggered this flash of insight.
He looked at the grammar of it, the structure.
Yeah, I cannot live with myself.
He suddenly realized, wait a second, if that's true, there have to be two of me in here.
There's the I, and then there's the self that the I can't stand.
And he knew in that instant that only one of them could be real. The other had to be the delusion.
And the moment he saw that separation, the moment his awareness, the I, pulled away from that miserable inner story, the self, the whole thing just collapsed. The suffering just stopped. The false identity crumbled, and he entered this state of deep, profound peace that lasted for a long time. That single realization is the foundation for everything in the book.
Okay, so before we really get into the mechanics, Tolle gives a kind of warning, doesn't he? A bit of advice on how to approach this.
He does, and it's crucial. He says we have to be willing to go beyond just, mental analysis.
Right.
He uses this great analogy. He says words are just signposts. The word honey, for instance. You can study it, you can analyze its chemical makeup, you can debate its meaning.
But you'll never actually know what honey is until you taste it.
Exactly. So if we just stay in our heads defining presence or being, we're just creating another mental box, another concept.
We're just looking at the signpost, not the destination.
We have to be open to tasting the reality the words point to. That's the real challenge.
Okay, so let's start unpacking. If that moment of seeing the two selves was the spark of freedom, what's the giant obstacle that keeps the rest of us from seeing it?
Well, it's something so common we don't even see it as a problem. It's compulsive thinking.
The nonstop chatter.
To nonstop chatter.
Yeah.
Or, more specifically, our unconscious identification with that chatter. That, he says, is the single greatest barrier to, enlightenment or just plain old psychological freedom.
And it's wild because our culture sees a busy mind as a sign of intelligence, right? But he calls it a dreadful affliction.
It's basically a normalized form of insanity, this constant river of mental noise judging, worrying, planning, rehashing. It's like a screen that blocks out everything else.
It blocks the silence, the stillness.
And that means it blocks any real self-awareness beyond just what you think about yourself.
He has that great analogy of the mind as a tool. It's a fantastic tool, but something goes wrong.
It's a superb tool. But the disease starts when the tool starts using us. The servant becomes the master. And the deepest delusion we have, according to Tolle, is believing you are your mind. When your consciousness is completely tangled up in your thoughts and your conditioning, you're being run by an instrument.
And the data he brings up to support this is just staggering. It's not a small problem.
No, it's not. The book suggests that for most people, something like 80 to 90% of their thoughts are repetitive, useless, and often actively harmful.
Just think about that. 80 to 90%. You're just replaying the same anxieties, the same old stories, the same arguments in your head day after day.
It's like he's saying your mental hard drive is almost full, and 90% of the files are just duplicates of corrupted data. It explains so much about collective burnout and anxiety.
Absolutely. He calls it a serious leakage of vital energy.
That's a great way to put it. It's like an attention economy in your own head, and almost all your capital is being wasted on recycled garbage. And you feel like you can't stop it. It becomes an addiction.
Which leads us to the thing that actually benefits from all this chaos. The ego. If the mind is the tool, the ego is the false self that's built by the tool.
Right. The ego is essentially a self-image, a story that's built from unconscious identification with your mind. It's all your labels.
But my job title, my personal history.
Your history, your nationality, your social roles, the things you own, your beliefs. It's the whole story you tell yourself and others about who you are.
So if I get fired, the intense pain isn't just about losing the income. It's about losing a huge piece of that story, that identity.
Precisely. The ego isn't real on its own. It's a construct. So it needs constant fuel to keep itself going. It needs thoughts. It needs external validation.
And its biggest fear is silence.
Its biggest fear is that the thinking stops. Because if that inner storyteller goes quiet, the ego just vanishes. It ceases to be.
That explains that feeling of a bottomless pit, doesn't it? Why someone can have immense success, fame, money, and still feel completely empty inside.
Because they're trying to fill a hole of being with doing and having. The ego uses all those external things, followers, bank accounts, awards, to patch up its own fragile structure.
But none of it is who you really are.
Not at all. And deep down, the ego knows that one day it'll lose all of it, which makes it incredibly fearful and defensive.
And that fear leads it to use its main weapon to keep control, which he calls the time trap.
The ego lives and breathes in psychological time. That's past and future. It can't survive in the now, so it does everything it can to deny the now.
It keeps the past alive because that's its identity.
That's its whole resume. Your personal history, all your grievances, your triumphs. That's the story of me. If you let that story go, the ego screams, "But then who are you?"
And it does the same thing with the future, always projecting some kind of salvation.
It's that little voice whispering, "I'll be happy
when I get the promotion.
when I find the right partner, when I finally solve this problem." It's a total reversal of the truth. It turns the present moment, the only reality you ever have, into nothing more than a stepping stone to a future that only exists in your mind.
And that resistance to what is, that's the actual mechanism of suffering. That's the machine.
That's the whole machine.
Yeah.
And to show just how deep this delusion goes, he uses that fantastic parable of the beggar.
Oh yeah, the guy sitting on the box.
For 30 years, he's been sitting by the road on this old wooden box, just begging for scraps. He's never once looked inside.
And then a stranger comes along and asks him what's in the box.
The beggar just scoffs. Nothing. It's just an old, empty box. But the stranger insists he look inside. So finally, he pries it open, and it's filled with gold.
It's such a simple, powerful story. We are all that beggar.
Anyone who hasn't found their true wealth, which he defines as the joy of being and this unshakable inner peace, is a beggar. Even if they have all the material wealth in the world,
They're looking outside for spare change.
when the real treasure is right there inside them all along, the box is the present moment, and the gold is presence.
So that's the perfect setup. How do we open the box?
Right. How do we find the off button for that machine?
Okay, so if the ego is all about thought and time, the alternative, which he calls being, has to be the opposite. How do we talk about being without it sounding, too abstract?
The most practical definition is this. Being is the feeling of your own presence. It's the simple, profound realization of, I am, full stop.
Before you add anything to it?
Before you add, I am a CEO, or I am anxious, or I am a father. It's that core sense of aliveness. It's your deepest self, and it exists outside of time.
So if the ego is the noise, being is the silence that the noise happens in.
Perfect analogy. And you can only really know it when the mind is still. That's why the ego fights it so hard. When your awareness connects with that stillness, that's what he calls presence.
So presence is just consciousness that's been freed from thought.
You've reclaimed it from the mind. And that means we can redefine enlightenment in a really practical way. It's simply the end of suffering.
It's not about becoming superhuman.
Not at all. It's about finding your true nature beyond your name and your story and just living from that place of interconnection. It's rediscovering the default state of peace that was always there, just buried under all the noise.
Okay, so the core problem is compulsive thinking. The first technique has to be about creating a gap in that nonstop monologue.
And this is the absolute foundation of the whole practice. He calls it watching the thinker. Instead of being lost in the voice in your head, you take a step back and you listen to it, as if you're listening to someone else talk. And at the same time, you're aware of yourself as the one who is listening, the silent witness.
Here's where I think people get stuck, though. If I start watching my thoughts, isn't that just another thought? The thought, I'm watching my thoughts. How do you not just create a new, smarter-sounding ego?
That's a great question, and the distinction is critical. The watching isn't a mental activity. It's not an analysis. It's a shift in attention.
Okay.
You're not judging the thought like, oh, that was a dumb thought. You are just aware of the fact that a thought is happening. That awareness, the watcher, is not a thought. It's the space the thought appears in.
So it's less about the content and more about just noticing the process, like, thinking is happening.
Exactly. And that simple shift, that bit of detachment, creates what he calls a new dimension of consciousness. The moment you witness the thought, it starts to lose its power over you because you're no longer unconsciously feeding it with your attention.
You're cutting off its fuel supply.
And when the thought fades, even for a second, you get a little break, a gap. He calls it the gap of no mind.
And that's the doorway.
That's the doorway. In that gap, you experience stillness, peace. That's the beginning of the joy of being. And as you practice, those gaps get longer and more frequent.
So that leads to the next practice, which is more active, directing attention into the now.
Right. So instead of just waiting for a gap to appear, you create one intentionally. You actively pull your focus away from what your mind is doing, and you anchor intensely in the present moment, in your sensory experience.
And this is where it gets really practical for daily life.
Yeah.
This is about using routine activities, things we normally do on autopilot.
Totally. The key is to take something that's usually just a means to an end and you turn it into the end itself. You give it your absolute fullest attention.
Okay, let's use the example from the book. Washing your hands.
A perfect one. Normally, when you're washing your hands, your mind is already on the next thing, right?
Yeah, thinking about the email I have to send or what's for dinner.
So instead, you stop. You force your entire attention onto the physical sensations. Feel the warmth of the water. Listen to the sound it makes. Notice the scent of the soap, the feeling of your hands moving together. Just be totally absorbed in that simple act.
And if the mind wanders off?
You just gently bring it back. No judgment. Just bring it back to the feeling of the water. The same thing applies to walking.
Something most of us do while completely lost in thought.
Right. So if you're walking to your car, instead of worrying about the meeting you're going to, pay attention to the feeling of your feet on the pavement, the movement of your legs, the rhythm of your breath. Just be there in the walk itself.
He even gives an example for something that's usually high stress, like getting in the car to drive in traffic.
And this is a great little ritual. When you get in the car, before you even turn the key, just pause. Close your eyes for a couple of seconds, notice your breath, and then just become aware of the silent, still feeling of presence in the car with you.
Just a few seconds.
That's all it takes to create that gap. Then when you do need to use your mind to drive, it's sharp and focused, not clouded by all the anxiety about being late or anger at other drivers.
So the result of all these little practices isn't that you stop thinking.
No, absolutely not. The result is that you stop thinking compulsively. You're rooted in being, so you can use your mind when you need it for a practical task, but it's much more effective. And then you can let it go.
So you're not anti-thought, you're just being more selective.
You're being intelligently selective.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, he argues that true creative genius comes from this ability to move between thought and stillness, to oscillate between mind and no mind.
Right, like those stories of scientists having a breakthrough not while slaving away at a desk, but while taking a walk or dozing off.
Exactly. Because the mind on its own is limited. It just recycles what it already knows. But when it's connected to that deeper intelligence of being, it becomes a truly incredible tool.
Okay, so we've covered the ego, the machine, and we've covered presence, the off button. Now let's look at the direct product of that machine, suffering. Tolle makes this huge claim that most human pain is totally unnecessary.
It's a massive claim. But it's also incredibly liberating. The logic is simple. Any pain you are creating right now is always some form of non-acceptance of what is.
It's resistance.
It's resistance to the present moment.
Okay, give me a simple example. I'm stuck in a really long line at the post office. The pain starts almost immediately.
Of course. Because the resistance kicks in. On a thought level, it's judgment. This is ridiculous. They should have more people working. This is wasting my time. And on an emotional level, that judgment becomes negativity. Frustration, anger, impatience. And the intensity of your suffering is directly proportional to how much you're resisting the reality that, well, you're in a line.
So if I just accept it, okay, I'm in a line, the suffering stops, even if the line is still there.
Precisely. The mind hates the present moment. It can't control it. Resistance is the mind's way of trying to deny reality. And that constant resistance, day in and day out, creates this buildup of emotional residue.
And that's what he calls the pain body.
This is such a key concept. The pain body is all the leftover emotional pain from your entire life that hasn't been fully faced and accepted. Every trauma, every grievance, every sadness, it clumps together into this negative energy field inside you.
It's the living past inside you.
A perfect description. And just like the ego, it has one primary goal: survival, which means it needs to feed.
And it feeds on more pain.
It can only feed on energy of a similar vibration. So once it gets triggered by something, maybe a critical comment or just a bad memory, it rises up, takes over your thinking, and it becomes you for a while.
And then it actively seeks out situations that will generate more pain.
It will start arguments. It'll make you wallow in self-pity. It'll create drama. It's why some people seem addicted to conflict or repeat the same self-sabotaging patterns over and over. The pain body is just trying to get its next meal.
Yes, that great line. It finds joy quite indigestible.
It does. It can't handle it. If you try to be peaceful when it's active, it'll flood you with negative thoughts to drag you back down. It's terrified of the light of your consciousness.
So the tool for dissolving it must be presence. But how is this different from just watching your regular thoughts?
It's more intense because the energy is denser. When the pain body gets triggered, that wave of deep sadness or rage that comes out of nowhere, the practice is to put your full attention directly on the feeling in your body.
So not on the story.
Not on the story. You don't get lost in, I'm angry because so-and-so did this. You just focus on the raw energy itself, the tightness in your chest, the fire in your stomach. You just accept that it's there.
You observe it.
You become the silent watcher of the pain. And this is the key. Unconsciousness, which is the pain body, cannot survive in the light of consciousness, which is your presence. The moment you witness it without judgment, you break the identification. It can no longer use you to seat itself.
So you're not fighting it, you're just holding it in your awareness.
Yeah.
You're holding it. And in that light of awareness, the trapped energy begins to transform. It's like transmuting lead into gold.
Yeah.
You're turning old pain into pure consciousness.
Okay, let's connect this to fear. So much of modern life is governed by anxiety. He makes a really important distinction between practical caution and psychological fear.
Right. Knowing not to touch a hot stove isn't fear. That's just intelligence. Psychological fear is different. It's disconnected from any real immediate danger. It's the chronic worry, the dread, the nervousness.
And it's always about the future.
Always about something that might happen. This creates what he calls the anxiety gap. Your body is here now, but your mind is in next week worrying about a presentation, or next year worrying about your finances.
And you can always cope with the now. You can't cope with a negative fantasy.
You can't. It's impossible. At the very bottom of all that fear, the ego's ultimate fear is death, annihilation.
And that core fear shows up in tiny ways, like in arguments. The need to be right. Oh, absolutely. Think about a stupid argument over politics or something trivial. Why do people fight so ferociously?
Because if their mental position is wrong, their sense of self feels threatened.
Exactly. To the ego, being wrong is a form of death. It's a mini annihilation. It's why people will destroy relationships rather than just admit they made a mistake. It feels like a survival issue.
So the practical takeaway is just to start noticing that defensiveness in yourself.
Just watch for it. When you feel that tightness, that urge to attack or defend, just ask yourself, what am I defending here? And you'll see it's just an idea, an illusion. The moment you see it, it starts to dissolve, and your sense of self can rest in something much deeper and more real than your opinions.
So far, we've focused on disidentifying from the mind. Now let's talk about anchoring our consciousness somewhere else. Tolle says the body is a crucial portal to being.
This is such a vital practice. Since the mind tends to suck up all our attention, the most direct way to get it back is to pull it out of your head and put it into your body.
And he's not talking about the physical body you see in the mirror.
No, he's talking about the inner body, the invisible energy field that animates the physical form. Some traditions call it chi or prana.
The life force.
The life force. And when you can feel that directly, you have an immediate, tangible connection to being. It's an instant doorway.
So how do we do that? How do we practice that rooting?
It's very simple. You can do it right now. Just close your eyes for a moment and bring your attention inside your body. Don't think about your hands. Try to feel the aliveness inside your hands. Then feel it in your feet, your arms, your legs, your chest. and then try to feel it all at once as one single, vibrant field of energy.
It's almost like a subtle buzzing sensation.
It can be, and the more attention you give it, the clearer it becomes. The real benefit of this is that it makes you psychologically unshakable. When something challenging happens, you get bad news, someone confronts you, your default reaction is no longer to get lost in a mental emotional storm.
You go into the body instead.
You immediately go within, you feel that inner energy, and you become incredibly still and present. Your foundation is solid.
It's like a psychic immune system.
That's a great term for it. It strengthens you against negativity. The storms of life will still happen, but you're not so easily knocked over because you're rooted in something eternal.
Okay, but what if someone tries this and it doesn't feel peaceful? What if they just feel agitation or restlessness inside?
That's a very common experience. It just means there's some leftover emotional static, the pain body, that needs to be acknowledged first. If there's a specific grievance attached to that feeling, like blame or resentment, it's usually a sign of non-forgiveness blocking the way.
And he redefines forgiveness in a really practical way.
He does. It's not about condoning what someone did. Forgiveness is simply giving up your grievance because you realize the grievance is only hurting you. It's a poison you drink, hoping the other person will die.
So forgiveness is just a form of acceptance. It's offering no resistance to life.
Exactly. Which leads us to the ultimate practice in the book, surrender.
A word that the ego really does not like. It sounds like giving up, like defeat.
The ego sees it as weakness. But true surrender is the profound wisdom of yielding to the flow of life instead of constantly fighting it. It's accepting the present moment as it is without any inner resistance.
Can we use a simple example?
Yeah.
That traffic jam again?
Perfect. So you're stuck in traffic. The ego resists. This is awful. I'm going to be late. That's the suffering. Surrender is to simply accept the reality of the instant. Okay, I am in traffic right now. This is what is.
No judgment.
No judgment, no negativity. That simple acceptance immediately frees up your consciousness from the useless task of fighting reality. Then, from that clear space, you can act. Maybe you find another route. Maybe you decide to just relax and listen to something.
It's surrendered action. It's not passive.
Not at all. It's incredibly powerful. You're acting from a place of peace, not from anger or frustration. And that action is always more intelligent and effective.
The book uses a very intense example for this, dealing with a major illness.
Yes, using it as a catalyst for enlightenment. The mistake people make is surrendering to the idea of illness. This big, scary mental label with a past and a future.
Right.
Instead, you surrender only to the present reality of it. The physical pain now. The weakness now. The discomfort now. You surrender to the isness of this moment.
And the sheer intensity of that forces you into the now.
It forces you into a state of continuous, deep presence.
Yeah.
And in that presence, you find a peace that is independent of your body's condition. You realize that who you truly are can't be touched by the illness. It's a powerful, transformative practice.
Let's move this into the place where these ideas get tested the most, relationships. Tolle is pretty blunt that most intimate relationships are fundamentally dysfunctional.
He is, and it's because they're rooted in the ego. People go into a relationship looking for someone to fill that hole inside them, that feeling of lack and incompleteness.
So the other person becomes a kind of drug.
A psychological drug, yes, to make the ego feel special, whole, validated. And at the beginning, it works. That's the in-love feeling, that high.
That feeling where the whole world seems better.
Right. But it's an addictive dynamic. Because eventually, the other person fails to meet the ego's impossible demands. They're just a person, not a god. And when they fail, or when their own unconsciousness triggers your old pain,
the buried fear and lack comes roaring back, and suddenly the person who was the source of your happiness is now seen as the cause of your pain.
And that's when love flips into attack. Criticism, resentment, the relationship becomes this drama swinging between neediness and hostility.
Right.
The ego loves the drama, by the way. It makes it feel very alive.
So true love has to be something completely different.
He says true love is a state of being. It has no opposite. If your love can turn to hate, it wasn't love in the first place. It was just an intense ego need. True connection is only possible when you can see beyond your partner's ego to the being within them.
So if you're in one of these dynamics now, how do you turn it into a spiritual practice?
The single most powerful thing you can do is to completely accept your partner just as they are in this moment, without needing to change them.
That ends the mind games right there.
It does, but it's hard, especially when they're acting unconsciously, when they're blaming you or their pain body is active.
But you do then.
You do not react. You don't get drawn into the drama. You become the silent witness. You hold the space. You allow their unconsciousness to be without judging it. in the loving space of your own presence.
So if their unconscious behavior meets no resistance from you,
It has nothing to latch onto, it runs out of fuel and dissolves. You're not fighting them, you're just refusing to play the ego's game. You are, in a sense, offering them a doorway out of their own suffering by staying present yourself.
and this idea expands way beyond just two people. He frames our entire global situation as a crisis of consciousness.
He doesn't pull any punches. He says the egoic mind has become the most dangerously insane and destructive entity on the planet. All the violence, the destruction of nature, it's all a symptom of mass unconsciousness.
So the survival of our species literally depends on making this shift. A quantum leap in consciousness.
That's his argument. It has to happen. And it is happening, but it needs our individual cooperation. No one consciously chooses pain or conflict. It happens because there isn't enough presence to dissolve the past.
Choice only begins when you disidentify from the mind.
Right, when you choose to be fully here. If you find yourself struggling, the diagnosis is simple. You're just not fully here.
Okay, as we start to wrap this up, there's one last really important distinction to make. The difference between happiness and peace.
A crucial difference. Happiness is always conditional. It depends on outside circumstances being good.
You get the promotion, you're happy. The stock market crashes, you're unhappy.
Exactly. Inner peace is totally different. It's unconditional. It's a deep, unshakable stillness that can exist even in the midst of great sadness. He calls it the good that has no opposite.
So if you lose someone you love, you won't be happy. That would be unnatural. But you can still be at peace if you surrender to the reality of what has happened.
That's it, precisely. And this is what he calls the higher purpose of suffering. Often it's the intense pressure of adversity that forces us to let go, to surrender, and to find that dimension within ourselves that is beyond form. That's the miracle.
I want to touch on one last thing, because it's such a popular idea today. This concept of loving yourself or having a relationship with yourself.
He actually argues that this is the root of the problem. When you have a relationship with yourself, you've created a split in your mind, the I and the myself.
The two entities that Tolle saw in his moment of crisis.
Exactly. And that mind-made duality is the source of all the inner conflict. But in a state of enlightenment, that split is healed. You don't have a relationship with yourself, you are yourself.
There's no longer a self that needs to be protected or fixed or improved.
And when you give up that internal relationship, he says, all your other relationships become love relationships. Because you're just relating to people from a place of wholeness, not from a place of need.
Which brings us right back to the central, most powerful point of this whole deep dive. Freedom is not in the future.
You can only be free now. Presence is the key. If you are waiting for something to happen before you can be at peace, you are trapped in the ego's game of time.
The single most important thing you can do then is to make the now the primary focus of your life, to stop creating more pain for yourself and others.
And if you think you still need more time to be free, you'll get more time. And you'll get more pain. Because, he says, time and pain are inseparable. So the final provocative question for all of us is really simple.
How much more time do you need before you can make the choice to create no more suffering?
Freedom is available in this instant. It's always just one conscious breath away.
Thanks for listening. And don't forget, at Core Concept HQ, we simplify powerful ideas to help you live smarter. See you in the next summary.